Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Has Kapil Sibal's meeting with the internet platforms been misunderstood by the media, or is he genuinely guilty of trying to regulate and worse, censor content? That's the key issue I shall pursue today with the Minister of Information Technology and Communication, Kapil Sibal himself. Kapil Sibal, there's a lot of ignorance, misunderstanding and confusion both about the meeting you had with internet platforms as well as what you asked of them. So let me first begin by trying to clarify the facts before I give you a chance to answer your critics. I know you can't share with us the offensive material that you discovered on the net, but for the benefit of the audience, would you describe what sort of material it was?
It was degrading, demeaning, vulgar and obscene and unacceptable by any set of community standards. And I have shown it to you, and I'm sure you'll agree with me.
Is it your position as Minister that if this sort of material had been widely disseminated and seen, it could have led to protests, perhaps even riots and violence?
It could very easily. And therefore, when I started the meetings, I said, look, let's work together and let's come up with a solution to this problem, because they themselves accepted that this kind of content is unacceptable even by their own standards.
That was said to you categorically
Yes.
by the internet platforms themselves?
Yes, yes.
Now, newspapers both in India and abroad have said that in fact your primary concern when you met the internet platforms was to protect Dr. Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi.
I'm really surprised. I'm absolutely appalled at that, because when the content was circulated to them, the content that we really objected to was the content that would impact religious sentiments in India, no matter to what religion you belong, Hindu, Islam, Christianity.
So on this point, let me just clarify. Even if, as a loyal congressman, you might not like criticism of the Prime Minister and Sonia Gandhi, is it your position that you were not seeking to stop lampooning or satirizing or criticism of the Prime Minister or Sonia Gandhi or any other politician on the net?
We would not like to do that for anybody. I mean, I think that the media has the right to criticize. The media has the right to be satirical, and that's part of the freedom of expression that we ourselves in government cherish.
So you would not stop that sort of content on the net in any shape and form?
Of course not.
Let's then come back to what you say was your central core focus: blasphemous and offensive content on these internet platforms. When did you first raise this issue with the internet platforms?
Way back on the 5th of September, we raised this issue, and we circulated some of the content that was blasphemous, that you mentioned, and demeaning. They agreed with it, and we said, let's start a dialogue and come back to us within 4 weeks.
What then happened?
Then on the 3rd of October, because they didn't come back to us, we wrote to them saying, let's meet up as quickly as possible, because you have to come up with solutions.
So between the 5th of September and the 3rd of October, although you'd asked them for a response, you got nothing.
We got nothing.
They prevaricated?
Yes, they prevaricated. On the 3rd of October, then we wrote to them. Again, we did not get a response. Then on the 19th of October, we again wrote to them. Again, we got no response.
So 3 times you contacted them and 3 times you got no response?
No response. Then on the 4th of November, the Secretary DIT called a meeting and said that, look, you had promised a response by 4 weeks. You haven't given it. Let's work together and see, because if you yourself say that this content is unacceptable, there must be solutions at your end.
At that meeting, what was their response?
Their response, no, there was a discussion on broad areas in which both sides agreed, and there was a discussion about some kind of framework that we can develop mutually. Oral discussion on that. Nothing much happened. Then on the 17th of November, the Secretary again met them and distributed what was orally agreed earlier, the broad parameters of the framework. They broadly agreed with many things in it, didn't agree with some things in it, but nothing was done thereafter.
So in fact what you're saying to me is that at least on 3 occasions when you contacted them, they prevaricated, they did not respond. So there is a history of your contacting them, yes, and them not responding.
Because we wanted them to come up with solutions.
And then there was also, during this process, a moment when there was an oral agreement or understanding on a broad framework.
Yeah.
But again, they didn't commit themselves to it.
Yeah, they didn't commit themselves. Orally, they agreed to some things, disagreed with some things, but they didn't commit. And then on the 29th of November, I called a meeting. And I was then present, and I said, look, 3 months have passed, and you had to come up with some solutions. So I want something in writing, and I give you 1 week's time, and I fix 5th of December as the date for a final response.
And that's the point at which the story has now reached.
Right. And on the 5th of December, they threw up their hands and they said, we can't deal with any of this at our end, and we will apply US community standards to you.
Now, there's a certain amount of confusion according to the reports in the press about what exactly you wanted. A senior official of your ministry, quoted in the Hindu on the 6th, says that you wanted screening pre-uploading. But the very next day, on the 7th, you said that actually you wanted them to look at content after it had been uploaded and after it had been established that it was offensive. So what was it that you wanted? Pre-uploading screening and monitoring, or post-uploading?
Karan, there can be no pre-screening of content on the electronic media and on the social media. Can we pre-screen the content that you have on your channel? We cannot. It'd be madness to ask for it, and I don't think that any sane person would. And we did not.
This is a very important answer you're giving. Let me quote you what the senior official of the Department of Telecom said to the Hindu on the 6th. He says, we have asked them to actively screen and filter all such material before they are uploaded. That is not your position.
That cannot be the government's position, and I don't think that could be the right quote, quite frankly.
So your position is in fact that you wanted these platforms to look at material after it was uploaded,
naturally,
if it was deemed to be offensive, and then remove it.
Deemed to be offensive by their standards, not even our standards. Deemed to be offensive by their standards, because this material will be offensive, will be degrading and demeaning by any standard.
So you were asking them to judge content by their agreed, personal, established standards, not by the government standards. On this content. What happens if, in your scheme of things, you had pointed out to them that certain material was offensive and they, by their own standards, disagreed? Would you have accepted that?
They have a right to disagree. We can only point out that some content is not acceptable by community standards in India. They have the right to disagree.
So I'm underlining 2 or 3 important things you said. First of all, you were not looking for screening and monitoring before uploading.
Absolutely.
As you say, that is impossible. That was not the government's position. Any quotation in the Hindu to that effect is wrong. Secondly, you were asking them to set up a system that they would set up to monitor content after it was uploaded, if it was deemed to be offensive, and that judgment would happen according to their standards, not yours.
Right.
Have I correctly understood?
Absolutely. And that if that content was unacceptable by our community standards, we'd point it out to them, and they had the right to disagree.
They had the right to disagree.
Of course.
Let me repeat to you what a Google spokesman has said about Google's position. When content is legal and does not violate our policies, we will not remove it just because it is controversial, as we believe that people's differing views, so long as they are legal, should be respected and protected.
We have no problems with that, except that they themselves accept that this content, which you have seen yourself, Karan, it cannot possibly be legal. And therefore, why did they not remove it? Take child pornography. Will they tell the world that we will not remove it because somebody else thinks it's okay?
So the anomaly here is that you don't disagree or in any way differ with the Google position I've just quoted. What you're pointing out is that even by Google standards, the content that you had drawn their attention to was impermissible, and yet they were not stepping in to remove it.
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is that they were failing to live up to their own standards.
Absolutely. They were failing to live up the law that they are themselves enforcing in their own country by their own community standards.
In other words, this is a sort of double standards that they are setting.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
Now, why did this entire communication, this entire correspondence that went on from the 5th of September till the 5th of December, why was it held in secret? Why did you not make it public to the Indian audience?
I wanted a solution in dialogue with them. I wanted them to come on the same platform as us and deal with this issue in a sensible, responsible manner. If this were to go out in the public, it would create problems, as you know.
So you deliberately, out of discretion, chose to keep this secret?
Absolutely. And I didn't mention it to anybody, either in government or outside government, because I don't want this content to go out.
Now, this entire business has come to light as a result of an article by the New York Times. How did the New York Times find out about this?
I'm a little surprised. We never talked to them. They never talked to us. They never sought my response. And they attributed all this to personalities in the Congress party, which is far from the truth.
Is it your suspicion and hunch that in fact the platforms themselves leaked this to the New York Times?
Why, no, I cannot possibly, respond to that because I don't know the facts. But surely, obviously this was done at somebody's instance. At whose instance, I don't know.
When the New York Times published this story, it did so with the twist that your primary concern was to protect Dr. Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi. You're saying to me that that twist is a distortion of your views.
It's unfortunate that a responsible newspaper like New York Times would come out with that story without even checking with me as to what content I was wanting to deal with.
At no point did the New York Times check with you about the veracity of the story?
Not at all. And there is no quote in the New York Times, if you notice in that article. Nobody is quoted.
Have you drawn the attention of the New York Times to the fact that they have published a story which you believe is inaccurate and untrue and which they did not double check with you before publishing?
Well, someone from the New York Times told me we want to keep you on your toes.
Someone from the New York Times said they want to keep you on your toes?
Yes.
So in other words, this was deliberately done as a way of getting at you.
I don't want to attribute motives, but I think the circumstantial evidence is quite clear.
The newspapers also say that an official of the American embassy contacted an additional secretary in your ministry to raise this matter.
Well, I don't want to talk about these things.
But you're not denying it.
Whether I deny it or not, I don't want to talk about it. But I think that such decisions must be taken by the sovereign government in the interest of the nation.
And you don't accept the right of American officials, be it even Hillary Clinton, who has commented on this 24 hours ago, to interfere?
No comments on any of that.
Let's widen our discussion. Let me put you one of the reasons why many people are suspicious, perhaps even distrustful of the government, and perhaps personally of your motives. It goes back to the fact that in April this year, your ministry published what are called intermediary guidelines, which contained vague, wide and imprecise terms such as threatening, abusive, disparaging, harassing, blasphemous, objectionable, defamatory. And people say that when a clever lawyer like Kapil Sibal deliberately uses such vague and imprecise terms, he's obviously casting a wide net to try and entrap. He's creating room so that he's got the grounds to censor whenever he wants for whatever he wants.
I'm surprised because if that were the case, I would have censored all this stuff by now. I would have done it by now because the guidelines are there. But we were having a dialogue with them. So obviously, it is not my intent ever to interfere in the social media in any form whatsoever. I wanted them to evolve their own guidelines by their own standards. But if somebody throws up its hands to content which is unacceptable, I'll have to something.
Would you accept that the use of terms that are so wide and imprecise, such as harassing, disparaging, objectionable, leads people to be worried, to put it mildly?
Well, I mean, if they are not worried by the content that they have put on their websites, they shouldn't be worried because we've not taken any action.
I'll tell you why people are worried by this sort of language. It's to do with the fact that when M.F. Hussein's paintings were objected to, they were called objectionable, they were called blasphemous, they were called defamatory. You and your son defended his right to show those paintings. Today people say that same wide language is being used and it worries them.
We will defend any citizen's right to freedom of speech till our last breath. That's what I stand for, and I'm sure this government stands for. But we don't want this kind of content to be on the social media.
Another reason why people are suspicious, perhaps even distrustful, is because Google has revealed that in the last 1 year, of the 358 items that the government wanted removed from Google, 255 or 71% come under what's called the government criticism category. And people turn around and say, once again, this is the government protecting itself.
I'm surprised that you said government wanted removed, because from my ministry, I think for Google in the last 1 year, probably 3 to 4 requests have gone and they have been denied, and we've not taken any action.
Other governments, state governments,
it could be individuals. It could be individuals.
But Google says they come under the government criticism category.
It could be.
And if I recall correctly from memory, of that figure of 255, something above 235 were requested by one single political authority.
Not to my knowledge. In fact, it's not been done by my ministry at all. As I told you, the ministry that is CERT-in, the organization that deals with it, I checked up yesterday, has sent 3 to 4 requests to Google, which have been denied, and no action has been taken, which means that the intent of the government is quite clear. We want them to take action. We don't want to be proactive on this. But if they throw up their hands, we'll have to evolve some guidelines. We'll have to.
In other words, they may force you to evolving guidelines which would be against your initial inclination. You'd rather they did it themselves.
No. It's not a question of forcing. Even those guidelines will be in the public domain. I'll call Karan Thapar, I'll call the entire media, I'll call them. We'll have a discussion. We'll have a round table. I'm going to do that on the 15th of this month. We will show them the content and say, look, you tell me how. It's like, as I said, child pornography.
I'm just going to pick up an important thing that you said in that answer. You're going to hold a roundtable on the 15th of this month, presumably with the internet platforms, perhaps with other people as well, to publicly evolve guidelines and a response to the fact that such material mustn't be on the net, and it needs to be tackled in an agreed consensual way.
I ask you, Karan, would you have it on your net, on your channel? You have seen the material.
So this...
No, I want to ask you.
Personally, no, I wouldn't, but it's not a decision I have to take.
Correct. So if you wouldn't, would you then your channel not evolve guidelines to make sure that it is not there if it were there?
And the object of the roundtable that you're going to hold on the 15th is to evolve guidelines consensuously.
Exactly.
With the internet provider.
Absolutely.
Have they been informed of it?
We will inform them. We will inform them.
So they may be hearing for the first time in this interview.
No, I said it in the Hindu also, that was published, that I'll be holding consultations.
Critics of yours turn around and say that rather than formally call the internet platforms, which was liable to be misunderstood and misinterpreted, as sadly has been the case, what you should have done was take a leaf out of Digvijay Singh's book, when he suffered a similar problem personally, and file an FIR and leave the matter to the police and courts.
You know, Karan, this is a procedure that will not work. Because by the time an FIR is filed and investigation is done, we'll have to get to know what the source of that content is. And Google and Facebook refuse to provide that source to us. So who are we going to prosecute? That's number one. Number two, assuming they give us the source, many of them are outside our jurisdiction. So how do we prosecute? It will cost millions of dollars to prosecute. While we go to courts outside our jurisdiction to prosecute, this content will be on the website. It will have caused damage, and kind of damage that you and I can't even imagine. And even if I were to do that, what would be the impact of that after 10 years? I mean, I want the solution today. As it happens, as the content is uploaded.
So a legal remedy for all the reasons you're giving me would be impractical.
Impractical, and it'll lead to nothing.
A leader in the Hindu today says that perhaps what the government should consider, what internet platforms should also consider, is the setting up of an independent regulator, one that doesn't come under the government, one that is separate from the platform. When you hold your roundtable on the 15th, is this an idea you're open to?
So we will ask them for suggestions. You know, when we will say what is the kind of not regulation, because I think it's an improper word to use. What is the kind of consensual guidelines that should be evolved, which should be part of self-regulation that you will enforce on your own terms? And if you do not enforce those regulations on your own terms, what is the kind of action government or other authorities or individuals can take against you?
So all of this is going to be an open discussion?
Absolutely. And it must be, because these are issues that are confronting society today.
Could you invite the press to be party to that roundtable?
I would love to have the press there.
So it will be completely open and transparent?
Yes, absolutely. As I've done in the past in all my roundtables.
Let me end by quoting to you one of the comments made by the Indian Express, often a newspaper that is a supporter of yours. In this instance, they were one of your most scathing critics. They say, this action only confirms how out of touch Sibal is when, as Minister of IT and HRD, his first instinct is to restrict and regulate.
Well, how is it? I mean, whatever I have said in the interview today and whatever I said in the press briefing doesn't either amount to restriction or regulation. It is evolving a consensus that is acceptable to the media.
So has such comment in the press been unfair to you?
I don't want to say anything. You see, people are, that's also part of freedom of expression. So I'll allow them to make that comment with the hope that as time passes, wisdom prevails.
But are you a misunderstood man?
No. People understand me. People know me.
And perhaps after this interview, hopefully they understand you a little better.
Thank you.
Kapil Sibal, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.